Hi, this is Herb Shapiro with the Dr. Vax channel on a terribly cold, miserable morning here in the Midwest. It was 17 degrees this morning and it's not even Thanksgiving. Even worse, our Cubs have become lovable losers again. The Bears are no better. So what can you do? Well, it's a wonderful day to geek out. Today, we're going to learn some real technical trivia and interesting things about Octoprint. We're going to learn about how the architecture resides on a Raspberry Pi. We're going to review how to install it. We're going to learn what to do if the installation doesn't work. You can't get to it over Wi-Fi. How do you find device IP address? How do you SSH to a Raspberry Pi running Octoprint? Why would you want to? How do you install plugins? What to do if a plugin fails? And then we're going to learn about this magical combination of Astroprint and Octoprint. So stay tuned and let's learn something together. There are many videos on YouTube about installing and configuring Octoprint. In fact, I have one, and you can see a link to that up above. Today, we're going to cover a bit more technical topics. We are going to take a look at the Octoprint architecture. We're going to take a look at what to do when your installation doesn't work. We're going to look at plugins, and we're going to look at a very specific plugin that combines two environments you might not think would work well together, and that's Astroprint, a web-based printing environment including full Cura slicer support, and Octoprint, a Wi-Fi Raspberry Pi front end for your 3D printer. In this picture, you'll see a diagram of a Raspberry Pi. It could be really a Raspberry Pi 3, 3 Plus, or 4. And in those typical configurations, not in the 0, in those typical configurations, you'll see that you have 4 USB ports. In the case of the Raspberry 3 family, there are USB 2 ports. In the case of the Raspberry 4 family, 2 USB 2, 2 USB 3 ports. You have one or more HDMI port, 2 on the 4, 1 on the 3. You have audio out, you have power in, you have an Ethernet connector, and you have Wi-Fi. Now, if we look at these two boards side by side, we have here a Raspberry Pi 3, we have here a Raspberry Pi 4. You'll see they look more the same than different. And the reason is that these key connector locations are used when you plug additional components called hats on top. So they're in the exact same position. So you can use many of the same hats with both of them. What's different, and this is the Raspberry Pi 4, is that it has 2 HDMI connectors, it has a USB-C connector, and it is much faster, probably twice as fast. Unfortunately, until recently, you couldn't run Octopi, which is the Octoprint image designed for a Raspberry Pi, on a Raspberry Pi 4. It only worked on a Raspberry Pi 3. However, version 0.17, we'll look at it in the video today, now also supports a Raspberry Pi 4. So one of the topics we're going to look at is you have your Raspberry Pi environment all set up. You want to go to a new version of Octopi. How do you move all your stuff? Another topic we will cover. Before covering that, we have to look at this picture again, though, and understand what the environment really consists of. You'll see it consists in gray of hardware. That hardware is running a Raspbian operating system. That's a Debian Linux port. Inside of that, you have the Octopi image that's loaded onto that hardware. In fact, the image includes both the operating system and the software. Perhaps the blue box and the gray box should be reversed. Inside the image, you have a Python virtual environment. Now, a Python virtual environment is just a way of packaging it together a version of Python with all the supporting libraries and plugins and modules for that version of Python. So within one computer, you can have multiple Python environments. each with different versions of the Python runtime system that are appropriate for your software. In the case of Octoprint, right now it supports Python version 2.7. There is a future version coming out, maybe the end of the year, maybe the beginning of next year, that will support Python 3. However, current version does not. So you create an environment and you put the components you need for Octoprint in that environment. Within Octoprint itself, you have both the Octoprint Python program and then separate programs called plugins that can be used to enhance Octoprint. So just as a review, the first step you need if you want to build an Octopi server, which is Octoprint running on a Raspberry Pi, is you need an image. You can Google Octopi, or you can go to the octoprint.org website and click on download and download that image. Now you're going to need to place that image onto an SD card, and you can't just copy it. You have to actually flash it or burn it onto the SD card, because basically you need a program that can access this memory device block by block and set it up appropriately for the Raspbian operating system that you're putting on that. I recommend using a program that runs on both Windows and Mac, and perhaps on Linux. I'm not actually sure, I didn't check. And this program is called Balena Etcher. Balena, B-A-L-E-N-A, is a company that makes an operating environment, tools, and software for embedded systems. As a service to the community, they have a program called Etcher that is used for burning images. Now, this is what the Balena application looks like running on a Mac. You'll see that I've loaded an image and I'm going to burn it to a generic media, and that generic media is my SD card. Now, it is very important that when you go to burn or flash this image, you don't inadvertently pick your hard drive instead of your SD card. You'll wipe out your operating system. You'll wipe out your computer. So what's an easy way to do that? Well, load up Etcher, click on the pull down to see what devices are shown, then put your SD card in. So initially your SD card is not in your computer. Click on the pull down again, see what new device shows up, and you'll select it. Then you click on the button that says flash, and that will put a copy of Octopi onto this SD card. Now, after you flashed Octopi, it will not immediately show up on your desktop. You'll have to take the SD card out, put it back in so it remounts it, and that will depend on your operating system. Once it does, you can point your File Explorer at that SD card, and here's a picture of what it looks like on a Mac. And you'll see I'm pointing to a file called Octopi WPA supplicant.txt. That's a very important file. In that file, you have to edit that file in order to put in your Wi-Fi network name and your password. You can't just use a word processor to do that. You need a programming editor that's not going to put extra characters into your file. I recommend, and here's a picture of the website, Atom. Atom is an editor that runs with both Windows and on Mac OS. And in fact, it does run on Linux also. It's a very simple to use editor. It's completely free. It's perfect for doing this type of thing. So if we open up our WPA supplicant.txt file, you'll see it here on the screen. You'll see where I filled in Dr. VaxNet, and I have access here, but you'd fill in the password. When you first open this up, there will be pound signs on the left of the 4 lines, just like they are in the section below. You'll need to remove those pound signs or this code will not be executed. Those pound signs are a way of saying, this is a comment, don't execute it. So you're going to save that file back to your SD card, and then you're going to look for another file. The next file you're going to look for is see if there's a file called SSH. SSH is a secure terminal control environment that you can use to connect from one computer to another. We're going to use SSH on our Mac or our Windows machine in order to help debug issues with Octopi, specifically the Octoprint running on the Raspberry Pi. In order to tell Raspbian, the Linux operating system running on your Raspberry Pi, that you want to permit it to allow people to access your machine with SSH, you put a blank file with just SSH as a name on your SD card. So just open up the Atom editor, put nothing in a file, say save as SSH, no extension. Now I did notice in the build 0.17 build of Octopi, that's the new build for use with a Raspberry Pi 4, it did look like that file was already there. But I know in the 0.16 file, it's not there. So we've flashed our SD card. We've gone into an editor, we've changed our Wi-Fi setup, we've made sure there's an SSH empty file, we unmount that SD card, we put it in our Raspberry Pi, we plug it in, and then we should be able to access it with a browser. So if we point our browser at octopi.local, we should see a screen under the blue items that we see here. And that's Octopi running for the first time. When you first run it, it will actually take you to a wizard that will ask you some questions, what you want to name this, a username, password for this version of Octoprint. Just follow those wizards through, it's pretty obvious, and go from there. But what happens if this doesn't work? You go to octopi.local, it doesn't come up. Well, there could be a couple things happening. One is your Wi-Fi setup parameters are not correct. Very often when that happens to me, it's because I forgot to take the pound signs off those lines. Number two, you already have multiple Octoprint servers. If you do, then that name is going to be taken by a different Raspberry Pi. So it may end up being octopi1.local, octopi2.local, octopi3.local. Or maybe your Wi-Fi is just not working. Well, if the Wi-Fi isn't working, we can try connecting on the Ethernet port just to see if this board is working. So plug an Ethernet cable between this and a router or a bridge in your home. And then you need to find out what address it's at, because maybe the octopi.local still isn't working. So to find what address it's at, you can take and you can look in your router, or you can download a program, sort of a Wi-Fi Explorer for your phone. You can look there. In my case, I use an Eero Wi-Fi environment. They have an app on my phone. I can look in that app and see the new Raspberry Pi that's on my network. Here's a picture on the screen of what that looks like on my Mac using iNet Network Scanner. The gray boxes cover up my other devices, so I don't give away too much information about my home. But you will see here that over here it says this is a Raspberry Pi Foundation machine, and it's running Octoprint. So the address for my Raspberry Pi was 10.0.1.23. So next thing you can do is go into a browser and type http://10.0.1.23 and see if you can connect that way. Now, if for some reason you can't connect that way, you can also try connecting to your Raspberry Pi to the operating system directly with SSH. And this is also a technique that's good to know about because it'll help you diagnose other problems once your Octoprint is already up and running. So I'm going to open a terminal window. This will work in the terminal on a Mac machine. It will work in the command prompt on Windows 10. But the SSH program, which is standard on a Mac, is an optional component on Windows 10. It is available. You can go into the Windows 10 software installer. You can select it. It might be under the management section as an optional component. Then to connect with SSH, we look at the screen here, you type SSH space pi, that's the username, at, and your IP address, 10.0.1.23. It will prompt you for a password. If you've never done this before, the password will be Raspberry. So the username is Pi, the password is Raspberry. One of the first things we're going to do is change that default password. We'll see how to do that in a minute. So you'll see here on the screen that it connected. After it connected, it displayed some information, including how I can get to this with a web browser. Now, one of the first programs I recommend you run from SSH is a program where you can use to set the time zone of your machine. Because you really want Octoprint to know the proper time zone that you're in, so times reported are correct. To do that, you type in sudo superuser because this is a privileged program, a program that requires you to have access to the operating system, raspi-config, and it's going to ask you for a password. Once again, if you've never changed the password, it's Raspberry. And then the first thing you do is select option number 1 and change the password to a new password. Then, after you've done that, you can use the same utility can be used to set localization options, which is where you set up the time zone you're in, the language you want to use, which will help your Raspberry Pi properly set the time by accessing internet time servers. You've installed it, it works, you've played around with SSH, you've set the localization options, you've changed the password. How do you enhance your copy of Octoprint? Well, the way you do that is with plugins from the plugin repository. So if you go to plugin.octoprint.org, you'll see a list of many, there are probably 30 or 40 different plugins that are available. And I'll show you in a minute some that I really like, and one that's very popular that I don't like, and I'll explain why. When you click on one of these names, you'll see here that it gives you the option to install a plugin from the command line. What is the command line? That's SSH. So if you've SSH'd into your Raspberry Pi, you can use the pip command line option. Now, when you go to install things with pip, you may get a warning that pip is out of date. In a few minutes, we'll look at how you would update your version of pip. Pip is the Python package manager used to install additional modules or options for Python. Now, if we look at this screen, we'll see 5 plugins I really like and one I'm hesitant to recommend. The first is Detailed Progress that will add additional information to your printer's LCD screen if your printer supports it. All of the Creality printers support it as an example. The Prusa printers support it. So many of the printers you would buy support it. The Monoprice printers do not. If you want to see the progress of your print in your browser, then you should install the Octoprint Print Display ETA option. That will add additional information to the Octoprint display so that you can see more information about your print in your browser. If you have a Monoprice rebranded Maoyan printer, that's the Mini Select, the Delta Mini, the NP10, the NP10 Mini, any of those printers, then you're going to want to install this option on Octoprint. When Octoprint goes to connect to a Monoprice printer, the connection protocol is a little bit different. This will fix that, so it will connect properly. So if you're using a Monoprice printer with Octoprint and it's not connecting, install this plugin. The next one is Octoprint Anywhere. It's a web service provided for free for 1 or 2 printers. You pay a couple bucks a month if you have more. That will allow you to use an application on your Android or iOS phone, on your Google or your Apple phone, in order to be able to monitor your prints remotely from anywhere. And it will do it without hacking into your network and exposing your Octoprint devices to the World Wide Web, which you should never do. This is a device that should remain inside your network. The only way you should access this from outside your home network or your office network is by using a program like Octoprint Anywhere. And I'll show you another alternative called Astroprint in a moment. And then the final one is that because with Wi-Fi support, you're asking your Octoprint device to dynamically obtain an IP address, an address on your network, it's possible that when you restart your device, it'll get a different address. So I was going 10.0.1.23. Maybe it's .24 the next time I reboot this device. Not likely, but possible. And therefore, I always display on my printer LCD the current IP address. And Octoprint IP on Connect does that. Now, what about Octalapse? Octalapse is a brilliant plugin. What it does is each time your layer changes, and there are other ways it can be configured to do this, but each time your layer changes, it takes your print head, it moves it off to the side, and it takes a picture. So you can create these wonderful, beautiful time-lapse photographs of your print. They look great. The problem is it adversely impacts the quality of your prints. Why? It's moving the print head away, it's taking a picture, then it's moving the print head back. That means it's going to take more time between layers. So you've printed a layer, you're about to print the next layer, and you're going to delay maybe a couple seconds or more. That layer you just printed is going to begin to cool off. When you put more filament on top, it may not stick as well. So I've stopped using Octalapse because it's caused too many print failures of complex prints. Now, how do you install these plugins if you don't want to do it from SSH? Well, you can do it right from Octoprint. You navigate to Plugin Manager, and then you select the option called Get More. And then you'll see this next screen. You'll see all the various options. You'll see a box that says Install. You click on the install box, and it will begin the installation. If the plugin installs correctly, you'll see a restart box to restart Octoprint. As simple as that. Most of the time it will. But what if you're low on disk space? What if you have the wrong modules, the wrong Python environment? There are a variety of reasons why an installation would fail. How do you diagnose that? Well, the first thing that happens is Octoprint will tell you that the installation failed, and it will tell you the names of the log files that you should look in to diagnose the problem. To get to this menu, you click on the wrench in the upper right-hand corner. You'll get to this menu, you click on Logging. And then you have to locate the logs it's identified in the error message. When you locate those logs, if you scroll through, and you want to scroll to the bottom, because the log viewer will show you the top, your error will be very much on the bottom, and you have to look and see what the error is. In this case, I was attempting to install a plugin that had a component, a module that requires Python 3.5. Well, that doesn't really make sense because Octoprint requires that you use Python 2.7. Now, in fact, there is a workaround for this. You can install that module manually. It is very, very complex. But when I saw this there, I just decided I wasn't going to use that plugin. So I went back. This was on an upgrade of a plugin. I went back to Octoprint, to the plugin manager, and I deleted that plugin. If you see other error messages, here are some things you can do. You can SSH into your machine, and the first thing you should type is df-h. That will show you the disk free space in human readable form. Instead of telling you blocks, it'll tell you megabytes and gigabytes. So you can see my root, and that's where Octoprint lives, has plenty of space. But if that was at 0, that would explain why your plugin failed to install. Now, the other message you'll see very often is that you have an obsolete version of pip, the Python installation module installation utility. So here are the commands down below. You can type ~oprint bin pip that says run the version of pip that is in the Octoprint virtual environment and install an upgrade. And that will take and upgrade your version of pip. So if you're getting error messages saying that the version of pip is obsolete, you should upgrade, this is how you do it. Now, if you've run out of disk space, it's very likely because you have a whole bunch of time lapses that take an enormous amount of space on your printer. So you should go to the tab labeled Time Lapse in Octoprint and look at all of the files listed there and delete, perhaps download to your computer, and then delete those time-lapse files. Then you can go back to SSH, do a disk-free -h, and make sure you now have enough space. In my particular case, I want to begin trying Raspberry Pi 4s. So to do that, I need to install a new version of Octopi. But if I install a new version of Octopi, I'm going to lose all of the stuff I've been setting up with all my plugins, my parameters, everything else. And I really don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is before I install the 0.17 version of Octopi, I'm going to back up my Raspberry Pi environment. That used to be very hard. Today, nowadays, it's very simple. All you need to do is click on the wrench in Octoprint and select the option called Backup. And then take and do a backup, and this is very important. I found sometimes it doesn't back up completely correctly or it doesn't download to my computer correctly. So after the backup completes, click on the option to download the backup to your local computer. It will download a zip file. You should take and unzip that file. On a Mac, you double click on it, it will unzip and create a folder. On a PC, on a Windows machine, depending on what version, what utilities you have, it will also unzip it when you double click on it. Make sure the file unzips correctly. Go into the directory, you'll see some very interesting stuff there. But most importantly, make sure you have a copy of the file that is not corrupt. Then flash your new version of an image file, put it into your Raspberry Pi, your 3 or a 4, 0.17 works on both. Go through the startup wizard, and then go back to that backup screen, upload your backup file, and begin the restore. In my case with 0.17, that worked seamlessly. Okay, now let me cover another interesting topic. I'm going to show you a plugin that is very, very interesting that I use a lot. There is a printer environment called Astroprint. Astroprint is an environment where you can manipulate and slice your files in the cloud, meaning from a website. That means you can use a Chromebook if you're in a school, you can use a low-powered computer, you use Windows, Macs, Linux, you even can use a tablet or a phone to slice files. But how do I get those files to my printer? Well, there are a couple ways. The Astroprint environment supports their own Raspberry Pi software. They also support pre-built hardware you put in front of your computer, but maybe you're already into Octoprint. You really like Octoprint. Well, guess what? There's an Octoprint plugin for Astroprint. With the combination of Astroprint and Octoprint, I can slice with Cura version 3.3 in the cloud. I have cloud-based storage for my sliced files, for my unsliced files. I can download files. I can move models from Tinkercad and My Mini Factory directly to Astroprint, and it integrates together as a seamless environment. After you install the Astroprint Octoprint plugin and you enter in the security, the API key, and it'll tell you how to do that, this is what it looks like. So I'm looking at a copy of Octoprint, and I clicked on the Astroprint tab, and I'll see all of the models that are stored up in the cloud. I can then take and print a model. I can slice a model. I have complete access to that environment. I also can go directly into Astroprint, upload, design, manipulate models, and they're available here. Even more so, when I go to Astroprint, it sees my printer now as a network printer because of the Octoprint front-end environment. So I have a very nice monitor screen which I can use from a computer, from a tablet, from a Chromebook. Furthermore, there is an Astroprint application for your Android or iOS machines. So you can monitor everything remotely. So I think the combination of Astroprint and Octoprint is very, very interesting. Well, folks, I hope you learned something today. I hope I helped you with not only the installation of Octoprint, but learn a little bit about using SSH to connect to that Raspberry Pi computer, using it to help diagnose problems, learning a little bit about installing plugins, what to do if it goes wrong, learn about if your Wi-Fi doesn't seem to be working, what are some things you can try, and about this very powerful combination of Astroprint and Octoprint. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this useful, give me a thumbs up, recommend the channel to other people, distribute the link to my videos to everyone you know that might be interested. That just really helps the channel because it exposes new people to these videos. And most importantly, leave comments so that we can continue a discussion together, which will help us continue to learn things together. Thanks. Have a good day.